What's going on, and welcome back to the channel. I've been playing Roots of Pacha, which has honestly become one of my favorite farming sims since I first played Stardew Valley, and wanted to give you 20 tips that I wish I would have known when I first fired up the game. And as always, if any of these tips were helpful, please do not forget to like and subscribe because I have a lot more farming sim guides and content coming your way. Now first off, you'll probably notice little mushrooms growing in the forest as you head to the caves. They don't sell for much and don't have really any apparent uses at the start, but they're extremely helpful later on after you've unlocked the composter. Why, you may ask? Well, putting 2 mushrooms into the composter yields a fertilizer called myco, which can be used to keep a crop alive into an off-season for one final harvest. This is great if you run out of time in a season or if you just want to effectively squeeze out one last harvest. The next tip may seem like an obvious one, but when you build your first home, I highly recommend putting your home in between both northern and southern farm areas. This will let you more easily get to your crops or animals without having to traverse too far. Since we're on the topic of farms, I recommend dedicating each area for a certain purpose. For example, I like to keep my animals up in the northern farm and my crops in the southern farm. This will allow your grass to grow thicker and will be less annoying when trying to tend to your crops. I cover this in a separate video in a little more detail, but a really easy way to make money very early game is by drying the fish you catch. I highly recommend making a few extra dryers, and days that you have a little more free time, fish as much as you can. Another excellent way to make money is through your animals, whether that be milking your ibex or shaving the fur off your bison. A lot of farming sims focus more so on the farming crops aspect, but in Roots of Pacha, real money is made from animal products, so do not neglect filling out your animal huts or upgrading them to be larger. Now speaking of crops, early game, grow your crops in 3x3 grids for a faster manual harvesting and watering. Farming sims are all about time management, so if you're having to run around at different angles to tend to your crops, then you're going to waste a lot of time that could be used for fishing or exploring the caves. Now I know that I just said that animal products are more valuable than crops, but you still want to make sure you're focusing on growing your crops overall. While you won't make bank early on with your crops, you'll want to turn your crops into food which can be used for stamina recovery for when you're exploring the caves or doing a little late night fishing. One of the most important things you can unlock in a farming sim is a way to automate watering your crops, and this game is no different. You don't have access to the idea irrigation early game, but when you do unlock it, you'll want to make sure you have plenty of extra animal furs, so be sure that you don't sell any of your furs. Make sure that you've got a couple areas of legumes growing, because if you don't like fishing, you can grind your legumes into plant meat at the mortar and pestle and then smoke them for another easy way to make some extra money. Now if you're like me, you can never tell if you've collected all the necessary seeds for that season. You can actually go into your menu and look at the seed bag to look to see if there are any blacked out seeds in that season. The blacked out seed will also show the season that the seed grows in, so you know whether or not you've collected all the seeds for that season. Now when you're introduced to the jungle, you may think that it's only useful for when you're completing prophecies, but I'm here to tell you you'd be wrong. Be sure to swing by the jungle, especially at the start of each season, because there are some seeds that actually grow here that you do not want to miss out on. Now speaking of completing prophecies, and I cannot stress this more, that while completing prophecies is extremely important, prophecies themselves are not tied to specific seasons, so do not feel rushed to catch every fish available or harvest every crop available each season. Now with that said, do be sure to utilize the new ways to process materials as you unlock pieces of equipment. This is how you will complete prophecies and unlock new ideas. Now personally, I'd like to save all my newly processed items in a chest just in case I need it later on for another process. Now this next tip took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize, but you can actually shake trees to drop items from them, like pine cones for example. The trees themselves though take time to get ready for harvest, so if you don't see an option to shake the tree, it just means you have to wait a little bit longer. Later in the game, you'll discover 2 new tribes, which you do not want to take for granted because it's more work to gift them as well, but be sure to prioritize getting their hearts up with the new tribe members because you'll be able to unlock new ideas with them. Do not neglect going into the caves like I did. A lot of the game progression is tied directly to going deeper into the caves and unlocking new materials you can find in the caves, so I highly recommend on rainy days packing some food and heading directly to the caves to do some exploring. Now speaking of packing food for stamina recovery, you do not have to have the first home expansion to unlock the ability to cook food. You can actually use the village cooking station, which is located in the large hut to the right of the bonfire. Now moving back to crops, I highly recommend buying crops from your grandpa, Igrork, once you unlock some seeds so that your farm isn't just a random mixture of crops that will be done at different times. You'll likely only be able to harvest a couple seeds at a time when you first start out, so your best bet, assuming you can afford it, is to buy enough just to be able to plant a 3x3 grid of seeds. If you can't afford it, I just stick with a 2x2 grid and just leave room to add more seeds to grow a 3x3 grid. Now with that said though, do not overstretch yourself with planting too many 3x3 grids because you'll likely dump all your stamina tending to your crops each morning and not have enough stamina left for other things like fishing. Personally, I recommend having around 6 small fields of 3x3 crops going at once until you get a feel for how much stamina you need each day. Now, my last and final tip will seriously help you not feel hard pressed for time, but make sure before you load into your game to set your game to 20 minutes per day. You can't actively make the change when you're already in the game, but the extra gain 5 minutes I like to spend fishing or gifting villagers or exploring, so it's definitely helpful to not feel so stressed out. Now, I hope the tips were helpful, and if you have any questions or have any other tips that you think would benefit a new player, please drop them in the comment section below so we can help each other all out. And I'll see you next time, YouTube. Peace out.